So good morning everyone. In this lecture we are going to cover another important aspect of Java, which is the nested classes, or we call it as the inner classes. So what are nested classes or the inner classes? When I say nested classes or the inner classes, they are one and the same thing. Inner classes are also called as the nested classes. So inner classes, they are, as the name suggests, they are the classes defined within the class. So we have a class, within a class we have another class, that is called as the inner class or the nested class. So in this lecture we will describe one of the most useful applications of the inner classes. And basically the inner classes, they are used as the helping classes. We also call them the helping classes. So nested classes are the classes that are defined within other classes, and the class that includes the nested class is called as outer class. So we have an outer class and we have a inner class. Defining an inner class is very straightforward. We will simply include a definition of a class inside the class. Now there are four categories of the nested classes which we are going to discuss about in this lecture. First one is the non-static inner classes, or we call them as inner classes or the non-static nested classes. Then static nested classes, then local classes which are defined inside a block of Java code. Block of Java code means inside a method. Anonymous classes which are defined inside a block of, they are also defined inside a block of Java code. So let's now start with all these classes. So this first of all, let's talk about what is the use of the inner classes. Now, as the name suggests, the class that includes the inner class is called as an outer class. So the definition of the inner class need not to be the first item of the outer class, but we place normally the inner class inside the class. So an inner class definition, it is a member of the outer class. In the same way, we have the instant variables and the methods of the outer class are the members. So the inner class is local to the outer class definition, but if the inner class is private, then the inner class cannot be accessed by the name outside the definition of the outer class. Using an inner class as a helping class is one of the most useful applications. So basically these are the helping classes. There are two advantages of using the inner class. Firstly, because they are defined within a class, they can be used to make the outer class self-contained or more self-contained than otherwise it should be. And the second advantage is that inner class and the outer class methods have access to each other's private methods and the private instance variables. So this is one of the important advantage of the inner class. Alright, so accessing private members, how to access the private members. Now within the definition of a method of the inner class, we can reference a private instance variable of the outer class. So we have defined a class inside the class. From the inner class, we can refer to any private instance variable which belongs to the outer class. Also, it is legal to invoke a private method of the outer class also. So by having the inner classes or the helping classes, we can access the private members of the outer class. Also, within the definition of the method of the outer class, we are talking about over here the outer class method. It is legal to reference a private instance variable of the inner class on an object of the inner class, and also it is legal to invoke a method of the inner class on an object of the inner class. So meaning to say is, inside an inner class we can refer to the private instance variable and the private method of the outer class. Also, from the outer class, we can refer to the private instance variable of the inner class by making an object of the inner class. And also we can invoke the private method of the inner class by making an object of the inner class. So in this way, we can refer to each other's private variables. Now, this is an example which is given in your book. It's a bank account class. Let's discuss this class now. So if you see over here, we have a class called bank account, and we have another class over here, private class money. So this is an outer class, this is an inner class. So the class money is private inner class of the class bank account. Outer class is a public class and the inner class is the private class. Now I have another important point to say over here regarding the public and private. They can be used within the inner and the outer classes. As long as you are within the definition of the inner or the outer classes, the modifiers public and private, they are almost equivalent. So let's discuss this example. We have a class bank account which is a public class, and we have a class money which is a private inner class of the class bank account. So the class money cannot be used outside of the class bank account. It's a private class of the class bank account. We will discuss the public classes also. Now, because the class money is local to the class bank account, the name money can be used for the name of another class outside the class of the bank account. So the modifier private in this line should not be changed to public. Now if you see in the money class, I have two instance variables and they are private. The modifiers public and private inside the inner class money can be changed to anything else and it will have no effect on the bank account. Now if I make these two variables dollars and cents instead of private, I make it as public, it will have no effect. So inside the inner class, the modifiers public and private, they will not have any effect to the class bank account. Now if I talk about the method, there is a constructor. Now the constructor is made as public and we have the another public method which is the get account method. All instance variables and all methods of the inner class are public to the outer class, no matter whether they are marked as public or private or anything else. So even if you make any method or any instance variables as a private of the inner class, it will not matter to the outer class. So they do not matter whether they are marked as public or private for the outer class. Alright, so let's go ahead. For this now. So this class, talking about the private class, private inner class, it has a constructor, it has a public method, get amount method. Another method is add in method and abort on null object. Now all these, this is a private method. So private and public does not have any like effect on the outer class. It can still access all the private and the public variables and the methods. Now inner class definition must end before the outer class ends, because the inner class is inside the outer class. So the inner class must end before the outer class. So the definition of the inner class ends here, but the definition of the outer class can continue. So from here, whatever we write over here, any methods, any variables or anything else, it will belong to the outer class because the inner class definition ends over here. Alright, now how to invoke the non-static methods of the inner class. So to invoke the non-static methods of the inner class outside the inner class, outside the definition of the inner class. So if you see here, inner classes ended over here, and if we want to invoke any non-static method of the inner class, we need to create an object of the inner class. So here we have made an object of the inner class because if we want to access any non-static method of the inner class, we need to create an object of the inner class. So here if you see, we have created an object of the inner class. Now getAmount method is a method of the inner class. The invocation of the inner class getAmount method will be allowed even if the getAmount method was marked as private. So as I told you, public and private does not have any effect to the outer class. Now over here, the outer class has access to the private instance variables of the inner class. So the class would normally have more methods, but we have included the methods we need to, so until here we have included over here. Alright, so going ahead, how do we compile the class? how should you give the name of the program? So the name of the program will be the name of the outer class. So compiling any Java file, when you compile any Java file, any class in Java, it produces a dot class file name. So whatever is the class, a dot name of the dot class. Now compiling a class with an inner and outer classes, it causes both the classes to be compiled, and it will produce a class file such as class name dot class. It will produce two class files for the one program, and then class name dollar inner class name dot class. It will be the outer class name, and it will be the outer class name dollar inner class name dot class. So it will produce two class files instead of the one class file. Alright, so let's talk about how to use this keyword in the inner class. But before we start using this keyword, let me just give you a demo of the inner class. Let's have a demo for the inner class. Alright, so I have a program over here. So I have a program over here, inner class. Now I have a program called okay, so let's discuss this program. I have a class called assignment. This is an outer class. The class assignment has one instance variable which is LT1 and of double type. Now this is a constructor of the outer class, and we have initialized the instance variable. Now this is an inner class. Inner class is marked as private, and the name of the inner class is LT2. Inside the inner class I have two instance variables, and the instance variables are of a private and they are double type. Then I have the constructor for the inner class, where I am initializing only one variable, not the other one. Then I have a public method which is find total, and it has a return type which is double. So this is an inner class method. Find total belongs to the inner class. Now what I am doing over here, I am calculating the total of the two tests done by the student, and I am returning the total. So the method ends over here and the inner class ends over here. This is the end of the inner class. Let me just write it. This is inner class ends here. So I have when the inner class ends, I have another method, print. Now this print method belongs to the outer class. So after I close the inner class, whatever the code I write, it belongs to the outer class. So what I have done over here, I have made the object of the inner class, and then I am accessing the inner class variables, outer class variables, and the inner class method. So LT1 variable belongs to the outer class, I can access it. LT2 variables belongs to the inner class. Now this private inner class variable will be accessed by the object of the inner class. So object of the inner class dot variable name. Similarly, the method also will be accessed like object of the inner class and the name of the method. So my outer class ends over here. Now let's compile it and let's check the file name. Now if you see, when I compile this, I have two classes for the assignment. I have outer class dot class, outer class name was assignment, and I have inner class which is LT2. It is compiled as outer class name dollar inner class name dot class. So for one program I have two class files because I have two classes in this. Now let's try to run the main program for this. Now here what I have done, I have made the object of the outer class and just called the outer class method because outer class is printing everything. Alright, so let's just look at it. So it's printing all the variables and it's printing the total. So this is how we can make a very simple program using the inner classes. Now let's talk more about inner classes, how to use this keyword and what are the different types of inner classes we can have. Using this variable in the inner classes. So this reference is applicable to inside the inner class. We can use it. From within an instance of the inner class, we can refer to two objects, inner object and the outer object. And to access the inner class object, we use this. And to access the outer class object, we use outer class name dot this. So inside the inner class, we can use the this keyword. Now, if we want to access any inner class object, we just use simply the keyword this. But if we want to access any object which belongs to the outer class, we can refer it by name of the outer class dot this keyword. So let's look at this example using this keyword. Now this is a class. Class has one instance variable which is of string type and we have already initialized. Now we have another class inside a class which is class B. Now class B has another variable which is also x. Now this x is of integer type and it has been initialized. Inner class also has one method f. Now no access specifiers are given, so that means they are default, and this f has one parameter. Now inside this we have used the x this statement. First statement is system.out.println x. Now this will refer to the local variable. When I write like this, this will refer to the local variable. What is the local variable? The one that is passed in the parameter. This dot x will refer to the instance variable of the inner class, class B. And the instance variable of the class B is int x is equals to 5. Now last statement is inner name of the outer class dot this dot name of the variable. Now this variable will, this line will print the outer class variable which is the x variable and it is of string type. So inside the inner class I can use the this keyword. If I want to access any object of the inner class, I just have to use this keyword dot followed by the object name. But if I want to use if I want to access any outer class object, then I have to the syntax is outer class name dot this keyword dot name of the object. Now the method ends over here and the inner class ends over here. So that means the main method is included in the outer class. So we have the main method and we have made the object of the outer class, and we have made the object of the outer class. Now if I want to make the object of the inner class, now here if you see over here, I am making the object of the inner class in the main method. I am not making it outside the class. So we can make the object of the inner class like name of the class followed by name of the object of the outer class dot new followed by name of the inner class. And then because this method belongs to the inner class, so I have to create the object of the inner class. So I am using like b.f and then I am calling the method f using the object of the inner class. So when I have passed 7, what will happen in this line? b.f method f will be called. Instead of x, I will have 7. Now when this system.out.println x statement is encountered, it will print 7, which is the local variable. Next statement is this dot x. It will print the instance variable of the class, which is 5. And the last line is inner class and this dot x. It will print the instance variable of the outer class, which is ICS201. So this is how the classes work. So next move ahead to more type of classes. Alright, so here we talk about static nested class. The previous example was non-static nested class. So an inner class has a connection between, which is a non-static nested class. It is a connection between objects and the outer class objects that we have created the inner class object. So that means this allows the inner class definition to refer to the instance variables or invoke the methods of the outer class. But there are certain situations when the nested class must be static. So that means if an object of the nested class is created within a static method of the outer class, or if the nested class has the static members. So to explain more about it, a normal non-static inner class is a kind of inner class which we have discussed so far. It is a connection between each of its object and the objects of the outer class. But if you don't want this connection, you can make your inner class as static by adding the static modifier to your inner class definition. So how will it go? Let's just look at the code. I will just write the syntax. So if you want like this, then in that case you will have a syntax like public class, outer class, and your inner class should be static, private, static, inner class. So now if you want your inner class to be static, what you have to do, you just have to add the static keyword with your class. So what is the use and what are the further characteristics? A static inner class can have non-static instance variables and methods. So a static inner class can have non-static instance variables and methods, but an object of the static inner class, it will have no connection with the object of the outer class. So both the objects, they will not be related to each other. You may encounter certain situations where you need an inner class to be static. For example, if you create an object of the inner class within a static method of the outer class, then the inner class must be static. And also a non-static inner class object must arise from the outer class object. Also sometimes you may want your inner class to itself have static members, then the inner class must be static. So if the members of the class you want to declare it as static, then the class must be static. But a static inner class can also have non-static instance variables and methods. Because a static inner class has no connection to the objects of the outer class, you cannot reference an instance variable or invoke a non-static method of the outer class within the static inner class. And also to invoke a static method of a static inner class within the outer class, simply what you need to put a method name with the name of the inner class and a dot. So to name a static variable of a static inner class within the outer class, just make the static variable name with the name of the inner class and the dot. So this is so simple. So to sum up, a static inner class is one that is not associated with the object of the outer class. It is indicated by including the modifier static in its class heading. Moving ahead. Alright, so I have discussed all these, how to invoke a static method from the outer class and from the inner class. Now let's talk about public nested classes. If the nested class you have made it as a public, I think the one that I showed you before in the example. If the inner class is marked with the public modifier instead of the private modifier, then it can be used all the ways we have discussed so far. The use of the public variable. It can also be used outside the outer class. So if the inner class is marked as public, it can be used outside the outer class also. The way that you create an object of the inner class outside the outer class is a bit different over here. In case of non-static class, so here In case of non-static nested class, it must be created by using an object of the outer class. I just showed you in the previous example. So we can make name of the outer class object is equals to new outer class, and outer class name dot inner class name, object of the inner class, and then outer class object dot new and followed by the inner class. This is what I explained in the previous example. So the prefix account, which is the outer class object, must come before the new keyword over here when we are making the inner class object. And the new object amount can now invoke all the methods from the inner class, but only can invoke all the methods from the inner class, but only from the inner class. So if I go back over here, what we did, name of the inner class followed by object of the inner class, outer class object dot new followed by the name of the inner class. So this is how you can create. Alright, so going ahead. Now in case of a static nested class, if I have the nested class which is static, how to make the object of the class? It is simpler. Outer class name dot inner class name, name of the inner class object is equals to new outer class name dot inner class name. Now, or in this case, the following are acceptable. You can call the non-static method, you can call the static method, you can call the static method of the outer class also. You can call the non-static method of the inner class, static method, and the static method of the outer class. Now we talk about the local class, another type of the class. A local class is defined within a block of Java code. Local classes are completely hidden in their containing block. When a class name is used only within a block, it can be defined locally. A local class can access instance variables of the outer class and only the final local variable of the enclosing block. So very important to note over here, local class can access instance variables of the outer class and only the final local variables of the enclosing block. Block means some method. So here we have an example of the local class. So for example, we have an outer class. The outer class has a variable instance variable name, and it has been initialized. Now we have a method, public void method. This method has two variables. One is j of integer type and another one is k. This k is declared as final variable. Now inside this block we have a nested class which is called class local. So inside the nested class we have made another method called test. Now what we are doing, we are accessing the variables of the block as well as the variables of the outer class. The outer class is the local class. So when I refer to j, it will give me an error because when I go back, local class can access instance variable of the outer class and final local variables of the enclosing block. Since class local is enclosed in the block method, it can access only final variables which are defined in the block method. Since variable j is not defined as final, it will give me an error because j is not final. System dot if I refer to k, that's okay because it is a final variable. If I want to refer to the name variable, it is okay. Like an inner class, I can access the outer class instance variables. So this marks the end of the test method. This marks the end of the local class. Now after the class ends, we have made an object of the local class and called the test method. Now this is inside this block method, not outside the block. We have created the object of the inner class and called the method inside the block, and the block ends over here. Alright, now coming to the main method, we have made the object of the outer class and called this method as usual. So this is how the local classes work over here. We have another example. We can make an inner class to implement an interface also. So let's look at this example. We have an interface thing, and we have obviously the empty implementation of the method test. We will provide the implementation of this method test inside the class. So my inner class can implement an interface also. So the code is same over here. I have a name variable which belongs to the outer class local. Now what we have done over here, public thing f, we have, so as we can see over here, our local class can, nested class can inherit from the interface also. So we have made the interface over here, and we have the outer class. We, as usual, same like the previous example, we have a string variable name, and I have a method f. Now inside this method I have the variable j and a final variable k. Now inside this block f I have a nested inner class local, and it is implementing the interface. Now since interface has only one method test, so since the class inner class is implementing inheriting from the interface thing, it must provide an implementation to this method. So same way, if I want to if I access this j object or the j variable, it will give me an error because this is not a final variable. I can access k, and similarly I can access the name method also. And after the class ends, I can make the object of the local class and call this test method. And same like the previous example, I can make the object of the outer class and then call the f method. So the meaning is my inner class can inherit from the interface also, but if it is inheriting from the interface, it must provide to the implementation of all the methods defined inside the interface. The last category is anonymous classes. We are not going to go into detail of anonymous classes, so just a small summary on anonymous classes. Now we have learned the local class. When a local class is used only once, it can be defined anonymously. So basically, anonymous class is a local class without a name and is defined and instantiated in a single expression. Previously, when we have seen a local class, we give it a name. But if I don't give a name to the local class, that is called as the anonymous class. Anonymous class has no constructors. Construction parameters can be given through the superclass constructor. And when anonymous class implements the interface, it cannot have any construction parameters. So this is all about the inner classes. And we have come to the end of the inner classes. Thank you so much.